Good evening, members, for the fourth day of refresher course on taxation. Today we have two speakers, CAT Bhanushekar from Chennai, and we have Mr. Raghunathan from Salem. Let me invite both the speakers to the dais, please. Welcome, sir. Thank you. Friends, let's race for ICA motto.
येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामंशो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शितः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता
Friends, today the first speaker, CAT Bhanushekar. He needs no introduction, but it's our pleasure and privilege to introduce to this august gathering. He is partner of Messrs. Ramasamy and Srinivasan, and he is in practice for more than 1.5 decades. A very prolific writer on taxation subject. His articles are published in various journals, including Commercial Digest, Consolidated Commercial Digest, published by ITR, Taxman, Tax Referencer, ITR. He is a member of the editorial board of Consolidated Commercial Digest of ITR. Formerly, he was a columnist in Hindu Business Line in the personal finance page features every Sunday in Tax Talk. And he is author of 2 books, Handbook on Assessment Procedure under Income Tax Act and Search Assessment under Income Tax Act. Very, very popular among CA students. And now he is not addressing CA students, but it's a long request from students that Bhanushekar should address students also. He is very commonly among the CS students very favoritely called as Tax Bhanushekar, Taxation Bhanushekar. Formerly visiting faculty of ICSI also and LIBA, and delivered innumerable lectures and presented papers on direct taxes, international taxation subjects, various seminars, meetings, workshops of ICAI, of SIRC as well as the other 4 regional councils. He has actively participated as a trustee in Brain Trust session organized by branches of ICAI and participated in various training programs. Especially he has a flair to train the commissioners, assistant commissioners and joint commissioners of income tax. Generally we hear when there is a hearing, and he is a visiting faculty to NADT, National Academy for Direct Taxes at Nagpur, where they hear when he speaks. He is former member of the Taxation Committee of Hindustan Chamber of Commerce, former treasurer of Southern Region Chapter of International Fiscal Association, Indian branch, and former regional council member and past chairman of Fiscal Affairs Committee of SIRC. Generally, there won't be PowerPoint as far as Tax Bhanushekar is concerned, because his points are powerful. He is 4 years senior to me and 1 inch taller than me. And that's CAT Bhanushekar. May I take the privilege in presenting before this August gathering CAT Bhanushekar. Let's of you here. CAT Bhanushekar.
New dimension to my initial, which I never knew. My name is T. Bhanushekar. There's no doubt on that. But he has rechristened my father, not me. Anyway, be that as it may, that's something for which my grandfather should be concerned, but he is not here to be concerned about it. Why I was talking about my grandfather is, if you will look at the topic, 10A, 10B, 80IA, 80IB, etc. There is an etc. after each of it. 10A, 10B, etc., 80IA, 80IB, etc. Now, I was reading somewhere the definition of the word etc. The word etc. means that I want to say something more than what I have said, but which I myself don't know. Because if I had known, I would have said it. So probably the etc. there refers to 10AA, 80IC, 80ID, etc. This is the I am still using the word etc. because I do not know whether they intended anything more. But in any case, I am trying to, make my topic a little wider in one way. Incidentally, why I started about my grandfather, I'll come back to that story. Now, most of these sections are dead and gone, like my grandfather is. But my past experience has been, if you look at the controversies that arose on 80 HHC, there was very little controversy when 80 HHC was there. Then 80 HHC was slowly phased out. All the controversies in 80 HHC started post the complete phase out of 80 HHC. And assessees made a lot of money claiming exemption under 80 HHC. In fact, some of them would have even boosted their profit, we don't know. Because they are anyway tax exempt. Because they will get higher bank loan, they don't have to pay income tax. There was no service tax, no other tax was probably then very much in vogue. And since it was export sales tax, VAT, nothing was applicable. Our fellows apparently must have boosted their profit also. And when it came to the Supreme Court, the various issues came up, and until then it was all at tribunal level, different views being taken. Then one fine day, the law started getting settled, and most of the issues, unfortunately, got settled against SSC. And now, when the market was weak, they had to cough up money for all the overstatement of profits which was supposed to be true and fair at that time. Now, most of the sections that we are talking of, 10A is gone, 10B is gone, 80IA is half gone, 80IB is 3/4 dead. But the controversies are just about emerging. And probably we are getting some bit of clarity on various issues. And some of them have been extremely, there have been very divergent views taken by different fora, by assessees, by revenue. In fact, only yesterday, one friend of mine was calling me up. It is an 80IB project, 80IB 10 project. Now, the total extent of land, if I remember right, is 47,000 square feet. And I understand that 1 acre will be 43,000 and odd square feet. I don't know exactly. They have applied for 80IB and obtained the 80IB approval also from the local authority. But while getting the approval from the local authority told them, you must surrender 5,000 square feet as gift to the local corporation, to the state. then we will give you approval. That makes 47,000, 42,000. Now our fellow wants to know whether he is still eligible for 80IB 10 or is not eligible for 80IB 10. Of course, I told him, I am not too sure, but stake your claim. He asked me on what basis do I stake my claim. I said, in that land that you gave, what did you do? He said, unfortunately, the land runs across, in between two of the areas where the buildings, residential houses are built. It runs across the land. And what happened in that land? We were asked to lay a road at our own cost. I said, that is also part of your project only, that means. Road was laid by you, not by the government. Government asked you to lay, you are debiting that expense into your project expense. If you can debit that expense, why not call that part of your project only? Well, we are making an attempt, let us see what will happen. Anyway, one thing is for sure, that this is definitely bound to bring in litigation and ultimately we will benefit. Whether the assessee will benefit or will not benefit, we do not know. In fact, just before I started, TV Srinivasan was telling me, when you stop learning, you are old, whether you are 20 or 80. I said, when you stop learning, invariably you start earning. Look at all those businessmen who did not study and went and did business and earned lot of money and who are paying us now. We are not worth minuscule portion of what they are worth. And we are here trying to learn, beating two time barrings. One is the December 31st time barring with the department, and the other is in the next building year beating the CPE time barring. I am only happy to see that this time barring seems to be attracting good crowds. Both of them, both these are only time barring. Otherwise, this crowd is not there. I am quite sure. Not for 1 week, one full week, starting 5:30, 8:30 and Saturday full day. I have just, in my paper, tried to take out some of the issues which we face frequently. Some of them there are decided cases, some of them there are no decided cases at all. And some of these are non-issues, probably, but the department makes it an issue. Now, the first issue that I have started with on 10A or 10B is a simple case where an assessee, by virtue of the provisions of 10B or 10A8, opts out of 10A or 10B. Now, normally, when I claim a 10A or 10B, I claim it for 10 consecutive years. There is no reason why I should opt out even if I have a 1 rupee profit. Because anyway, I don't get it in a later period. If I have a 1 rupee profit, I should claim my 10A. But there can be a situation where the assessee may end up with a loss, and that is exactly when the 10A comes into play, the opting out comes into play. Now, the assessee opts out of 10A, but interestingly, the department says in the next year when I make profit, current year I incurred losses, I opted out of 10A by virtue of 10A8. The department says you have opted out of 10A, therefore in the next year you cannot get 10A. Next year I have made profit. Next year I have made profit. Now, to my mind, this is not a correct way of looking at it, because the provisions of 10A8 are quite clear. It says that you must make a declaration before the time stipulated under 139(1) that you are opting out of 10A or 10B for that matter. And once you opt out of 10A or 10B, then in the subsequent year, the minute I file a return claiming my 10A or 10B, as the case may be, I am deemed to have opted in. Now, one more controversy arises out of this. The section says you must give a declaration in writing opting out. In majority of the cases that we have seen, very rarely has assessee filed a letter before the department saying I am opting out. What he has done is he has shown loss to be carried forward. He has not specifically stated that he is opting out. Now, what will be the situation in such circumstances? In my personal view, the minute you say loss to be carried forward, that means you have opted out impliedly. And that is enough. Declaration, there is no specific form in which I need to make that declaration. And therefore, in my opinion, the opting out has happened. And in a subsequent year, your making the claim of 10A would suffice for the claim of deduction under 10A in a subsequent year. Department cannot say you did not opt in because there is no provision in the Act for opting in again. The second issue that I have raised on 10A or 10B for that matter, both of these are very similar, is a situation where if you look at 10A8 or 10B8 and 10A or 10B6, now 10A8 says you can opt out, and it starts with notwithstanding anything contained in any other provisions of this section. Similarly, 10A6 also starts with a non-obstante clause, which says notwithstanding anything contained. And 10A6 has an overriding effect in the sense that it says that the losses of the 10A unit cannot be carried forward. I don't want to talk more than this at this point. It cannot be carried forward for some years. I don't want to get into for which years. And it also goes on to say that you cannot claim ATIA, ATIB, etc. in respect of the same undertaking. Now, if we take it that 10A6 overrides 10A8, because both of them override the provisions of 10A. Now, which overrides which becomes a difficulty. If I say 10A8 overrides 10A6, then in the years when I don't opt out of 10A, by virtue of 10A8, 10A6 will be operable. On the other hand, if I take it that 10A6 overrides 10A8, then it will mean that though you have opted out of 10A by virtue of 10A8, you still cannot get the benefit of carry forward. Then what will I do by opting out? When I opt out, I actually want that loss to be available to me. If even after opting out 10A6 will have operation, then it will simply mean that I cannot get any benefit by virtue of 10A8. In other words, what I am trying to say is 10A8 will become completely invalid. And fundamental rules tell me that you cannot interpret a law in such a manner as to render any part of the statute invalid. And in order to ensure that it does not become invalid, we have to understand that 10A8 will override 10A6. Now, coming to 10A6 for a minute, the losses, the business losses or unabsorbed depreciation of the undertaking, which is claiming the 10A or 10B, 10A6 would say that it cannot be carried forward beyond the last of the assessment years in which the deduction under 10A or 10B is claimed. In other words, within the 10A period, within the 10A holiday period, I am entitled to the set off if I have not opted out. If I have opted out, I will be eligible even beyond the holiday period under 10A or 10B. Because once I have opted out, then 10A6 also will not apply to me, and that prohibition will also be done away with. So that will still be available for carry forward or set off beyond the holiday period. Whereas if you are still in the section within the holiday period, you will be entitled. 10A6 does not operate as a prohibition. We will now also remember that 10A and 10B are no longer exemption provisions. If they had been exemption provisions, then the loss cannot be carried forward at all. But 10A and 10B are now deduction provisions. Though it falls under chapter 3, though it says incomes not forming part of total income, if we look at 10A or 10B, it says a deduction shall be allowed. And the courts have been unanimous saying that 10A and 10B are only deduction provisions. This is something which will get repeated over and over again. The third issue is a case where I have given two examples. Example 1 is where there is an eligible undertaking which is eligible for 10A, which has got a loss, and a non-eligible undertaking the same year has a profit. What will be my total income? Assuming these are my only incomes. My 10A unit having a loss, non-10A unit having a profit, what should be my income? My income will be the income of the non-10A unit, which is 100 crore, minus the loss of the 10A unit, which is 20 crore, net 80 crore. The second alternative is a case where the eligible undertaking has an income, the non-eligible undertaking has a loss. I repeat here, the difference is, it's just the reverse. The eligible undertaking having an income, the non-eligible undertaking having a loss. Now, what should be my income? My income should be eligible undertaking profit 100 less 10A, assuming my entire turnover is export and assuming my 100% export is going to be entitled to 10A, then my deduction under 10A will be 100. Balance 20, which is the loss of the non-10A unit, can be carried forward. Now somebody to whom I was telling this said, you are blowing hot and cold. To some extent, to my mind also, it appears that we are blowing hot and cold. I have little doubt on this. But then 10A to my mind or 10B to my mind is a provision which granted me an incentive. Why should I become a loser because of this section when there is no express provision in this section to make me a loser? In fact, there are two decisions. One is the special bench Chennai in Scientific Atlanta. The other is the decision of the Karnataka High Court in Yokogawa, India. Both of which have said that this is the manner in which you must take it. Now let's go to another logic, something that I will come to again in the context of 80IA. Now if you take 80IA, there is a subsection 5 in 80IA which says that for the purpose of computing the 80IA deduction, such eligible undertaking, that is the 80IA undertaking, is deemed to be the only undertaking of the assessee. Now I don't have corresponding provisions here in section 10A or 10B or for that matter in 10BA. Therefore I don't have to stretch myself any further. I am just computing the 10A first. The other units loss I am continuing to carry forward. There are at least two decisions, one of the High Court in Yokogawa, the Karnataka High Court, and the other in Scientific Atlanta, the Chennai bench, special bench. Now continuing this issue itself a little further, the non-eligible undertaking has a brought forward loss, while the eligible undertaking has current eligible profit. I repeat, the non-10A undertaking has got brought forward losses. The eligible undertaking has profits in the current year. What should I do in my computation? How am I to compute it with reference to 10A? How am I to compute the 10A? Now, this controversy has been going on for some time. In fact, there are a number of cases which we are aware of where the department has, taken a stand which is different from that of the SSE. Number of cases where they have not done it, where they have issued 148 notices, 263 notices, etc. Now, first of all, in my personal view, if it is a business loss, I don't see much of a difficulty at all. If it is an unabsorbed depreciation, I still don't see any difficulty in computing the 10A, provided in the example that I took just now, the non-10A or 10B unit is having the brought forward losses. The 10A unit is having current profits. This is very similar to my earlier example. Only that in the earlier example, it was current loss of the non-10A undertaking and current income or profit of the non-10A undertaking. If that view is taken by the High Court for current itself, which is in Yokogawa of the Karnataka High Court and Scientific Atlanta, the Chennai Special Bench, I think that same view can comfortably be taken in respect of brought forward losses and unabsorbed depreciation of the non-10A undertaking. Whether it has to be set off before computation of 10A or after the computation of 10A, it should be after the computation of 10A. Going one step further, what if this losses and unabsorbed depreciation belonged to the 10A undertaking itself? How should I compute my 10A? Now let's assume last year I am eligible for 10A. I have had losses. I have opted out of 10A. It is an eligible undertaking, but I am opting out of 10A. Current year, I have a 10A unit, the same 10A unit in which I am making profit. Should I first set off the brought forward loss and unabsorbed depreciation and then compute 10A, or should I compute 10A and then set off the brought forward loss and unabsorbed depreciation? Now, assessees would apparently like the 10A to be done first and then the set off to be done. Department says, no, you do the set off and you do the computation of 10A later, so that that loss is lost for us. Otherwise, I will retain that loss probably for future carry forward. Whatever is my non-eligible profits for 10A will still be set off. I will get a better benefit. Now here, we originally had the decision of the Karnataka High Court in a case called Himmat Singhe Side. Now, in Himmat Singhe Side Limited, the first thing that we have to note was that this was relating to a year when Section 10A was an exemption provision. And the second thing you will notice is Himmat Singhe Side was dealing only with unabsorbed depreciation. Now, in Himmat Singhe Side, ultimately the Karnataka High Court came to the conclusion that insofar as unabsorbed depreciation is concerned, you must first set off the unabsorbed depreciation and only then compute the 10A or 10B. Now, their rationale was also very good. They said, whatever is your unabsorbed depreciation is deemed to be your current depreciation by virtue of 32(2). Once it is deemed to be current depreciation in terms of 32(2), you necessarily need to claim the depreciation and then only compute the 10A or 10B. That was their logic. And I probably don't see anything wrong in that logic also. Now, interestingly, this very decision in Himmat Singhe Side has been followed by the Kerala High Court in a case called Patchspin India Limited. Now, in Patchspin India Limited, a similar question arose and the Kerala High Court has taken a different view. But we have to notice that 10A then was an exemption provision, whereas 10A now is a deduction provision. Still the same view is taken, and I honestly to my mind think that that is the correct view. Whether it is an exemption or a deduction provision, that depreciation has become current depreciation. Once it has become current depreciation, then first you claim your depreciation and then only compute the 10A or 10B. It is deemed to be current, and all the consequences of it being deemed to be current will have to necessarily follow. Interestingly, we now are left with business losses. Now, insofar as business loss is concerned, to my mind, there are no real decisions on this subject excepting division benches of the tribunal. And there have been conflicting decisions of the division benches of the tribunal. In fact, this matter was referred to a special bench. The special bench of 3 members sat down, heard the matter and said, this is a fit matter to be referred to a larger special bench. And wrote to the president saying, you please constitute a 5-member bench. The president has constituted a 5-member bench and the matter is pending. But insofar as business loss is concerned, it is not deemed to be current. Once it is not deemed to be current, in my view, you compute the income of the unit, compute the 10A, then if there is a remainder, you set off in terms of section 72 the business losses. It cannot be that you can first set off the business losses and then compute, for the simple reason that once you cross chapter 3 and go into chapter 6, which deals with the set off, then you go directly into the gross total income and go into chapter 6A. How do you come back to chapter 3? Because this is, the department has to compute this in terms of chapter 3. So to my mind, it should be only correct that unabsorbed depreciation should be set off, then 10A computed. Unabsorbed business losses should not be set off, 10A should be computed, then unabsorbed business losses should be set off. This is provided they are from the same undertaking. If the loss is belonging to a non-10A undertaking, then neither unabsorbed depreciation nor business loss, this view should be taken. No, that's fine. Am I audible? That's okay. Anyway, now the next issue is a case where the company is an existing software development unit and it is now registering itself as a STP unit in somewhere in the middle. It has started earlier, but it is registering in the middle. Now the department makes a claim saying that you are not eligible for 10A because you are formed by splitting or reconstruction. In fact, I have orders in my hand of the department, the Commissioner Appeal, the assessing officer, all of them, where they have said the undertaking is formed by splitting / reconstruction. They have not said whether I am formed by splitting or reconstruction. And the best joke is, my case is a case where I have 3 units, originally all 3 registered STP units. Then I took another place and consolidated all the 3 units into one. That is nothing but I had 3 offices, small offices. I made it one big office. Right? Department says this is splitting. If 1 becomes 2, you can call it splitting. If 3 becomes 1, and if department still calls that splitting, this is more than hair splitting. But that is how they have written the order. I have the order in my hand. AO's order, CIT appeals order, tribunal said there is no splitting at all, fortunately. Department has gone to High Court saying no, there is splitting. Right? I don't know what I have split. I have united. See, they don't seem to understand marriage and divorce. They are just the opposite. Right? Splitting is the opposite of joining. But then that's how their orders are. So don't be surprised if they say 1 unit is split into 1 unit. If 3 units can be split into 1 unit, 1 unit can be split into 1 unit. Interestingly, there is a board circular, circular number 1 of 2005, where the board circular itself says that if you are registered as if you are not registered as an EOU, you later on get yourself registered as an EOU, you are entitled to the deduction under 10B for the balance of years. That is, let's say you are entitled for 10B for 10 years. 3 years have gone past. In the 4th year, you get your 10B. You claim your 10B for the balance 7 years. Now, the problem is department says that circular of the board is under 10B. What about 10A? I really do not know what stopped the board from saying 10A/10B, just like our fellows wrote splitting/reconstruction. But they have carefully used the word 10B, EOU. The problem is, what about 10A? Again, in my personal opinion, there should not be much of difficulty. In fact, tribunals across the country have applied this circular of the board on 10B in 10A also. Next is reconstruction. For everything, the department starts with reconstruction. In fact, we had an STP in Chennai, registered STP unit in Chennai. Now, what assessee did was, he wanted to shift his base from Chennai to Kerala. So, he applied for an STP registration in Kerala, moved to Kerala. Department says, you have reconstructed. What have I reconstructed? The same unit is there. I have just moved to, I have got the STP Chennai registration. I am now taking an STP Trivandrum registration, simple. Right? So, the department starts off with saying reconstruction. Now, interestingly, on reconstruction, we have a beautiful decision of Supreme Court, which of course was not rendered in the context of 10A or 10B, but still the principle would be the same, which is in a case called Textile Machinery Corporation. In Textile Machinery Corporation, the Supreme Court says if there must be a reconstruction, there must be the transfer of assets from one person to another, however small. Now, let us take all the cases that we have seen now, examples that we have seen now. 3 units becoming 1, 1 unit becoming 1. In any case, have I transferred the asset from one person to another person? I might have transferred the asset from one undertaking of the assessee to another undertaking of the assessee also, but definitely not from one person to another. Therefore, I will definitely not be hit by this clause relating to reconstruction. If you have transferred from one undertaking to another undertaking, you may get into a third difficulty, which is transfer of assets from which are already used for any other purpose, and you should not cross the threshold limit of 20%, which is the maximum. But in the cases that we have taken, I have not even transferred the asset from one undertaking to another undertaking. It is the very same undertaking operating from a different place. It is like saying that if Mr. Gopalakrishnu Raju shifts his house to a different place, he is a different man. It's as good as that. If I move from this place, these are rented premises, I move from this place to the next room. How would you say I'm a different undertaking? I'm the same undertaking functioning from a different place. And for that place, I need to take an STP registration. It is as simple as that. The next 2 issues should be very simple. The next two issues are, first issue is where a transfer pricing adjustment is made by the assessing officer, whether the amount that is increased, the income that is increased as a result of the transfer pricing adjustment will be eligible for 10A, 10B. Well, rightly or wrongly, very unfortunately, we have a proviso to 92C4 which says transfer pricing adjustments will not be eligible for 10A or 10B, or for that matter for Chapter 6A benefits. Now, first of all, I don't understand. Whole idea of transfer pricing is that you should not shift profit from India to outside India so as to evade taxes. Why will a 10A unit which is enjoying a tax holiday shift the profit to another country and pay tax there? The government of India says you are shifting the profit to America and paying 40% in America but evading tax in India. What am I evading here? Interestingly, there is a decision of the special bench of the tribunal in Aztec, the Bangalore bench, where the tribunal says, no, even if you are a 10A or 10B unit, still transfer pricing is applicable to you. Even though your intention was not to evade taxes, transfer pricing is applicable to you. So as of today, we are living with that only. And the proviso says that if a TP adjustment is made, no 10A, 10B. So what we are doing is, if there is a TP adjustment, we show that in the memo of computation of income and we claim 10A, 10B. Because if the adjustment is made by the transfer pricing officer, I am not entitled. So I myself take the 10A, the TP adjustment, show it in my memo, claim the 10A and close. It's easier that way. Next is, in the course of normal assessment, not as a result of a TP adjustment, if an addition is made, whether 10A or 10B will be available. The apparent answer is yes, because there is no prohibition. Now, in most of the 10A, 10B cases, department sits scrutinizing each and every voucher, little realizing that at the end of the day, if they are able to say that yes, I am not able to establish some expenses, my income from the undertaking will go up, my 10A will correspondingly go up, and there will be no tax. But still the department wants to go ahead with this grind. Of course, in transfer pricing and all of this, less said the better. In fact, there is one case which we are just doing where the transfer pricing officer says, after all, this price was determined in a negotiation between you and the other party. Therefore, this is a controlled transaction. Which transaction will take place without negotiation? Even getting into an auto rickshaw, we negotiate. That is also TP. Only thing is, it is not international. But if you go to Singapore and bargain, it is international transaction. Please remember. You are a resident, he is a non-resident. Okay. That is the extent to which the department is taking it. I would rather not, talk much about what is happening on all these areas. In fact, 80 IB 10, which we will come to later, there was one case where I was so exasperated when I was arguing the case in the tribunal. I was disgusted, almost virtually, because I had argued so many cases, and this case ultimately came up. I said, Your Honours, really I said this in open court. I said, Your Honours, there is one building, residential house, no doubt. Everybody agrees that there is a residential house. Everybody agrees that it is developed. Everybody agrees there should be a developer. I am saying I am the developer. Everybody else is saying he is not the developer. Department is saying there is no developer, but it is developed. You can suspect who is the father of a child. I said this also. If you suspect whether there is a father, science has not gone to that extent as yet, that you can suspect whether at all there is a father. Who? Matter of speculation. I don't want to get into that. But then department says the person who constructed is a contractor. The person who has got the land is a landowner. The person who bought it is buyer. Then who is the developer? There are only three parties in this transaction. Am I the developer? I am not. Now, if the department does not agree with any of these, then what only will happen? And that's exactly what happens when you go with a claim for a deduction. Invariably, they come up with all kinds of peculiar theories. In fact, the next of the issues is one of the most peculiar things where I understand department has gone to Supreme Court. It is a very simple issue. In computing export turnover, it says export turnover means amount brought into India in convertible foreign exchange less expenditure incurred in foreign currency, etc., whatever. Now, I am subtracting something in computing export turnover from the amount brought into India in convertible foreign exchange. What department says is, while you can subtract, or not while you can, while you should subtract it from export turnover, you should not subtract it from total turnover. Simple arithmetic, mathematics, no law, right? Now, for this there was a special bench constituted, special bench SC1. There are at least two decisions, one of the Karnataka High Court and one of the Delhi High Court, where the courts have held that what is subtracted from numerator must be subtracted from denominator. But I was most impressed with this decision of the Delhi High Court. Delhi High Court is in a case called GenPact India. It is not yet reported. It has come in Tax Management India, a website. That is the most interesting decision. They say, very simple. They have explained it in the most simple manner. The decision of the special bench is in Saxoft, which is very elaborate, explains everything. But this, they have taken a very simplistic view. They say total turnover is the aggregate of export turnover plus domestic turnover. Export turnover is there on top. Take that to the bottom. Now add the domestic turnover. You will get the total turnover. It's as simple as this. Why are you fighting for all this? Department has carried this to Supreme Court. Right? Whether total turnover should include items which are not subtracted. Now there is a second theory to this. What the department does is, whenever you debit internet expenses to your P&L account, they say this is to be subtracted. This is to be subtracted in computing export turnover. Now, if you look at the definition, it says amount brought into India in convertible foreign exchange, but does not include freight, telecommunication, insurance attributable to the delivery of articles or thing or computer software outside India incurred in foreign currency. Now, it's very important to note that it is only the expenditure incurred in foreign currency, one, and that expenditure should be attributable to the export of articles or thing or computer software. Now, as far as internet is concerned, it is never incurred in foreign currency for it to fall within the ambit of this subtraction in the numerator. Department comes with a different theory, not on internet but slightly different. Now, I do what I call, I designate my employees there. My employees carry out the work outside of India. Now, in such a case, I am not exporting the software. I am developing the software outside of India in-house. Now, the salary to those employees, they are saying that is expenditure incurred in foreign currency. Yes, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that the expenditure is incurred in foreign currency. But is it attributable to the export of computer software? The answer will be no, because I have not exported the software. The software is created there only. And therefore, there are views taken by the Chennai bench of the tribunal and other benches, the Mumbai bench as well. ChangePoint Technologies is the Chennai tribunal, where the Chennai tribunal says you cannot subtract it even from the numerator. So, if you don't subtract it from numerator, the question of subtracting it from denominator becomes a secondary issue. Of course, this issue is also, something where there is still a debate that is going on. I will not take you through issue 9, but go into issue 10, because issue 9 mistakenly has come here. It should be an 80IA issue. Issue 10 is on 10AA. Now, there is a assessee who has developed an SEZ, and that SEZ that is developed, the assessee also is having one undertaking where there is a manufacture or production of an article or thing that is happening, let us say. Now, can the assessee claim 10AA in respect of the development activity of the SEZ? I think there are two different things. One, for the unit in the SEZ, I can claim the 10AA benefit. For the development of the SEZ, I will not claim the 10AA benefit, but I will claim the 80IAB benefit. Now, 80IAB allows me the deduction in respect of the income derived from the development of the SEZ itself. So, I will claim both the deductions, one partly under 80IB, one partly under 10AA. Now, incidentally, if you will see a assessee who is developing an SEZ, there is a good chance that this assessee is going to have a rental income from the letting out of the properties. Now, department is also taking a view that if you are letting out the properties on rent, that rental income is not eligible for ATIAB. They are saying the rental income is not eligible for ATIAB. Why? Means it is not business income. Now, if I develop an SEZ, one, I can sell it, right? Then they will say it is coming under capital gain. Or I can keep it and let it out on rent. If I keep it and let it out on rent, they will say no, you are not eligible because it is rental income. Either way, they are saying this. To my mind, it is only the income derived from developing an SEZ. Under what head that income falls is completely irrelevant. Whether it falls under the head house property or falls under the head business or falls under the head capital gain, so long as it is derived from development of SEZ, I think the benefit of ATIAB should be available. Go further into some of the issues on ATIA, ATIB, etc. Issue 9, which is an ATIA issue, I will cover first. Now, this is a case which is still being argued in the Chennai tribunal. See, what the department says is, see, I have, for example, I am constructing a road, a highway, let's say, one of those toll plazas. What department says is, whatever you collect by way of toll, I will give you ATIA, that is infrastructure income, no doubt. But when I get a license from the government to construct the road and collect toll, the government of India also tells me you can permit people to lay underground cables, like these telephone cables, net cables, etc., which are going, and you can collect revenue for that. Apart from that, you are permitted in these roads on the sides to place hoardings, permit people to place hoardings, subject to certain rules and conditions. And on that also you are entitled to claim, you are entitled to earn income. You can earn income out of it. You can charge for it. Now, department says for toll income I will give you ATIA, for other two I will not give you ATIA. Why? Means they are not derived from the activity of infrastructure development. Now, simple question to my mind is, all of us buy newspaper. Some of us read, some of us don't read, like I don't read. I read very little of it because I don't, I have lost the respect for any of these news channels or these, because they are interested in sensation for everything. Be that as it may. Now, there are advertisements in, say, let's take the Hindu for example. They are selling, or let me take Times of India. Times of India is sold for 1 rupee. Out of this 1 rupee, they will never make profit. Their profit comes from the advertising income only. Now, can you say that the advertising income is not derived from the newspaper activity? If I don't have newspaper, where I will get the income from? Where will I get the income from? Now, this is exactly what the department is saying. Toll income, I will give you ATIA. There is loss only if you take only toll income. Your 30 rupees toll income is not his profit. His profit comes from the underground cable and the hoardings that are there. That is where his profit is. Department says that is not derived from the undertaking. To my mind, it's very simple. It is derived from the activity, infrastructure activity or the undertaking. I have no two views. A simple example I will take is a case where I have a newspaper and an advertisement in the newspaper. Now, if after this international conference is over, you ask Arul Ali what is the surplus from the international conference, he will add up the advertisement income and only tell you the surplus. If he subtracts that, he will show negative. Everybody knows it is derived from the conference. It's as simple as that. Now, that is why this sticker, he is technically supposed to debit to international conference account. Check up when the accounts are ready. Second issue is on ATIA again.
That sticker by itself has come as a compliment. And the chairman SIRQ is promoting the...
Then there should be a credit and a debit. Please check on that. Then there could be two accounting mistakes. Right. Anyway, ATIA, there has been a dispute as to what is the initial assessment here. This dispute arises in ATIA, not in ATIB, because ATIA allows me a tax holiday for 10 consecutive years out of the first 15 years, and in certain cases out of the first 20 years. In other words, if I am entitled for 10 consecutive years out of the first 15 years, I can start from year 1 and claim to year 10, or year 2 to year 11, likewise year 6 to year 10, 15, whichever way I choose to. So I can choose which is my initial assessment here. That is what is the concept. Now, assume that in the first 3 years the undertaking has had losses. Fourth year, the undertaking earns a profit. Fourth year, the undertaking earns a profit. The 3 years when I incurred losses in the ATIA undertaking, I have a non-ATIA undertaking in which I have set off those losses. But there is a section ATIA 5 which specifically says that losses from the initial assessment year cannot be set off because it is deemed to be the only undertaking. From the initial assessment year, that undertaking is deemed to be the only undertaking of the assessee. So, once the initial assessment year starts, whether or not you have already set it off against the profit of another undertaking, notionally that loss has to be once more set off against the ATIA undertaking, and then ATIA to be computed. For example, if I have a 20 rupee loss from an ATIA undertaking, a 100 rupee profit from a non-ATIA undertaking, my income of that year is 80, I pay taxes on 80. Next year, if my income from the ATIA undertaking is 150 and my income from the non-ATIA undertaking is say 175, then my total income is 130, which is my ATIA undertakings income, plus 175 less 110. That is because 130 may be the profit of my ATIA undertaking, but that 20 rupees which was the loss of the last year has to be notionally set off in the current year again, though it is already set off, and my ATIA profit has to be reckoned as only 110. This is the rationale. This is the logic of ATIA 5. Now the question is, which is the initial assessment year? Because this ATIA 5 has operation only from the initial assessment year to the period for which I am entitled to the tax holiday. ATIA 5 does not travel before or after the initial assessment year. The whole dispute is never on after, before, because my year of commencement could be different from my year of claim. My year of commencement may be year 1, my year of claim may be year 6, first claim, because any 10 out of the first 15 consecutively I can claim. So that means I could start my claim from year 6. Now there has been a lot of controversy. Department says you must set it off notionally. Our claim is, once I start making the claim, the notional set off is beyond doubt. That is, in year 6, if you have started your claim, and in year 7, you have a profit, whereas in year 6, you had a loss, there is no doubt that the loss of year 6 has to be notionally set off, even though it is otherwise set off against the income of the other undertaking. But if I am making my claim from year 6 only and the loss relates to years 1 to 5, then whether that has to be still notionally set off, though I have not made an ATIA claim in those years. I am claiming it only from year 6. Now the Madras High Court in Mohan Breweries and Distilleries, which my other colleague in his paper refers to as Velayuda Swami Spinning Mills, both are the same. MBDL and Velayuda Swami were decided together by the Madras High Court. Right? Were decided together by the Madras High Court. They have one citation. It is actually Velayuda Swami Spinning and others. The others was Mohan Breweries and Distilleries. But in the inside of the order, the major discussion is on Mohan Breweries and Distilleries. I have access to both of these orders of the tribunal. That's why I know what facts are narrated. So whether it is Mohan Breweries or Velayuda Swami Spinning, the decision is one and the same. The citation is the same. Now here, the Madras High Court in no unclear terms says that the initial assessment year is the first year in which you make the claim for ATIA. That means prior to my ATIA claim years, if there are losses, those don't have to be notionally carried forward and set off against the ATIA undertaking before computing the ATIA deduction. Incidentally, there is a decision of the special bench of the tribunal, Ahmedabad special bench in Goldmine Shares and Finance Limited, where the special bench had an occasion to deal with some kind of a similar issue, where the issue again arose as to which is the initial assessment year. There is a lot of confusion created by the department, I will say, not by decisions, saying that the special bench is against SSE. Special bench is not against SSE at all. If you look at the decision very carefully, just 4 lines in paragraph 4 of the said decision of the special bench. Paragraph 4 is very simple. The claim of the SSE or the appeal of the SSE relates to assessment year 97-98. In the assessment year 96-97, the SSE filed a return showing a loss, but saying in a note below that I am eligible for ATIA in case you convert this to profit. If you are going to make an addition and convert it into profit, I am entitled to ATIA. Special bench said that is the first year in which you made the claim. That is your initial assessment year. Therefore, though you may have set it off otherwise, notionally carry it forward and set it off against the income of 97-98. It was very simple. Facts were different. It was not a decision where it went against SSE. In fact, Goldmine Shares is also in favor of SSE only. Just those 4 lines in paragraph 4 will clarify the whole issue. The next is a case where the SSE has commenced a trial run of in a ATIB undertaking. Then the question arises whether the deduction under ATIB should be available from the year in which the SSE starts commercial production or trial run. Now we will notice that in a year when I do the trial run, I will invariably not have income. My first year, if it happens to be my trial run year, I will not have income. Very rare, trial run produce may also, whatever production or manufacture happens as a result of it can also be sold. It can also be sold, no doubt. But invariably the expenses are likely to be much more than the whatever little realization of income, and you will end up with a loss. So you will lose 1 year. We would always like to take it to the next year, that is the year of commercial production, so that will be a year when I will show profits. If you read ATIB, the provisions of ATIB 14, more particularly clause C, it says, the undertaking begins to manufacture or produce an article or thing. Begins to manufacture or produce an article or thing. Now, there are difficulties here because it is when it came to a claim like depreciation, a claim like investment allowance, etc., we argued saying that we should get depreciation, we should get the investment allowance even in the year in which I did trial run because I have put the asset to use. Now interestingly, we have at least a couple of decisions. One is the Madras High Court in 151 ITR 464 and the other in Delhi High Court in 322 ITR 631, both of which say that the ATIB claim will commence from the year in which commercial production starts. Now we can also distinguish it. 32, we argued that it was put to use. Put to use means even trial run is put to use. But when do I actually start manufacturing or producing an article or thing? I start manufacturing or producing an article or thing only when I start commercial production. Let's take a simple example. Right? There is a lift that is commissioned in the Institute of Chartered Accountants, SARC. He first commissions the lift, then he tries going up and coming down. Now can you say the lift has already started, if somebody has to pay 1 rupee for using the lift, can you tell that fellow who went up and down the lift to say, pay me 2 rupees? He will say, get out. I will not try the lift, you try. If you die, go. I am taking the risk of my life, going up and down this lift to see whether it is properly installed so that you will be safe. So it may have been put to use, there is no doubt about this. But whether it has started yielding income, the answer is no. So the courts probably are taking the view that commercial production is what is relevant. Next two issues are fairly similar. First is a case where an eligible ATIA or ATIB undertaking transfers the profits or transfers its goods or articles to another undertaking which is not eligible for ATIA or ATIB. How is the income of the ATIA or ATIB undertaking to be computed? Please note that this is provided for in ATIA 8 and all of the sections ATIA, ATIB, ATIC, ATID, 10A, 10B, 10A, 10BA, 10AA, all of these sections make it very clear that the provisions of ATIA 8 will apply. Now what they say there is, in ATIA 8, if the assessing officer is satisfied that the value at which it is transferred from the non-10A or non-10B or non-ATIA or non-ATIB undertaking does not correspond to the market value of such goods or services, then the assessing officer may compute the ATIA or whatever the section, the deduction, by taking the market value and then computing the quantum of deduction. If I must explain differently, what he is now going to do is, the assessing officer, the same profit will be the profit. Supposing I have 100 rupee profit, 40 is from non-ATIA, 60 is from ATIA. He will say, no, 70 is from non-ATIA, 30 is from ATIA. He is only going to recompute the ATIA. In fact, only a couple of days back we were arguing a case before Settlement Commission, and the entire disclosure before Settlement Commission is only this one point. A disclosure is a very small amount of 700 crores. Very small amount. And the department wants us to enhance our offer by another 400 and odd crores. That's all. Right? Nothing great. And this is one case in the Settlement Commission, very rare case which I have seen. Normally in the Settlement Commission we make a prayer saying, the Commission may be pleased to permit us to capitalize the income offered. That is, I can use it as source later. But here I have not